have to become yourself.
Welcome to Creating a Buzz About Health podcast with Paula Carnell.
Hello. So today I wanted to talk about products from the hive, and I like to think that they're all medicines from the hive. Now, I thought that I'm always talking about propolis and about royal jelly and pollen and honey. And then I realised when I looked back through all my podcast episodes, I hadn't actually done a sort of a basic run through on all the different things you can get from the hive. So that's what I'm going to do now. Now, you're probably very familiar with honey from the hive, and you may or may not be familiar with the belief that honey is medicine. I like to think it's medicine, and actually there are many people around the world and many cultures around the world where honey is treated as if it is medicine, and I think that's wonderful. Now, as a student of herbal medicine, I'm very aware that many plants are medicinal and have medicinal properties, and I'm also aware that bees self-medicate. So it makes sense that when bees choose certain plants to make their honey, that those plants are actually going to produce some of the great medicine when it's transferred into the honey. And we know that the bees will self-medicate and they'll store different varieties of honey throughout the hive so that through the winter months, they can then eat the honeys that contain the vitamins and the minerals that they feel they need most at any particular time. So honey is definitely a medicine, and it's a really commonly taken product from the hive. Now, in recent years, it's been quite difficult to get enough honey from the hive to share around or to sell, as well as ensuring that the bees have enough honey inside their hive. So when I work with clients, I really like to help them see what other products, what other things they can do to actually ensure that they have enough products from the hive that they can then have as a business or get as a return on investment. And there are lots of other things that you can take from a hive that I think are beneficial. So the second most common one would be wax. So if you're going to take honey, you're going to get wax. So the wax cappings, which are when you have the frames of honey, the bees cap each cell with a very fine, clean white piece of wax. So if you cut that off to then produce your honey or to extract your honey, you have what we call super wax. And it is super wax because it's super clean. It doesn't have lots of bee footprints on it, which would make it darker with propolis or pollen or other contaminants. So it's a really clean wax. And it's super wax that you would use if you're going to make skincare products. So if you're going to make lip balm or any kind of products that you would put onto your skin, you would use the super wax. Now, the other waxes, you can actually then melt down and you can make candles, you can use for soaps. There's all kinds of different products, balms, skin balms. So wax is a really beneficial byproduct because you're not actually harming the bees by taking it. Now, the older the wax in the hive, the darker it's going to be. So when you look at beeswax candles, you can actually have all different colours of beeswax. You can go from sort of a pure white and then right through to sort of a dark brown, dark black wax. And the darker it is, the more propolis it has in it. So even better for a candle, because as you burn it, you're going to be releasing all those volatile oils that come in propolis. So the next one I'll talk about is propolis. Now, propolis, I think, is my favourite product from the hive. Propolis is made by the bees. What they do is they collect the resin from trees. So when a tree has a wound or is harmed in any way, it secretes a resin, which is its sort of healing balm itself. And so this is already medicinal for the trees. The bees will collect this resin, bring it back to the hive, mix it up with pollen, and then they will make this sort of gooey, sticky stuff, which they will then stick their hive together with. So any gaps, any drafty holes, they'll actually fill up with propolis. And beekeepers are really well known for not liking propolis because it makes it very difficult to remove frames or to inspect the hive or even to take honey, because the bees will stick all the frames down with the propolis. But there is lots and lots of evidence to show that bees that produce propolis are more healthy and they're much more able to protect themselves against other infections. There's been amazing research at Minnesota University for many, many years, about 20 odd years, where they have found that bees that line their hive, the inside of their hive, with propolis, even when they are injected with the spores of contagious foul brood, they do not get sick. That is how amazing propolis is. So we know that propolis is antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral, antiseptic, antibiotic, and antibacterial. So the bees will line the inside of their hive and actually treat it as their skin. If you think that bees are not a whole being, one single bee is not a whole being, they are a super organism. So you need 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 bees to make a one being. And if you look at their hives in the wild, where they might be inside the cavity of a tree, there they have lined the inside with propolis. And I'm actually working with some bees at the moment who are on cocos keeling, but they've actually made their hive on the outside of a tree. So there's all this wax comb coming on the outside of the tree, but actually there's so much propolis on the tree. And I've actually found as the tree had fallen and then been moved, and now the bees are sort of half in and half out of a hive. But there's also a cavity inside that tree, and it's so thick with propolis. It's amazing. So I've been harvesting some of that propolis because it's such good stuff. So with humans, if we harvest the propolis, there's several ways you can do it. If you can either scratch it off from your beehives in the winter months. So any unused boxes or boxes that you had honey in, you might find that there's propolis around the edges. So what you can do is in the winter months, it's a lot easier to scratch it off. So particularly if it's cold, you can just scratch it off, put it in a glass jar, then freeze it. And then you've got choices of what to do. So if you're freezing it, it's going to last, a lot longer than if you don't. But you can, when it's really, really cold and frozen, you can press it down or grind it up into a powder. It will ruin whatever grinder you use. So if you have a mortar and pestle, have one just for your propolis. And if you have a coffee grinder, don't try and grind your coffee beans in it afterwards. So have a separate one for your propolis, because propolis just sticks to everything, stains everything sort of yellowy brown, and it's really difficult to get out. So you can then have your propolis as a powder, and then you could just eat it. You could mix it into smoothies. You could sprinkle it on things. You can, do what you like with it. If you keep it when it's warm, you can actually roll it up and put it in your gums, or put it in, if you've got a painful tooth, you can just shove a little bit of propolis in there. And there are so many scientific studies that show the benefits of propolis on teeth. So it's really, really great stuff. Propolis will also be good for your skin. So if you mix it in with a cream, so with some oils, maybe cocoa butter, so you really want it to be in a fine powder, and then mix it up and as much as you can. Then if you put it on your skin, it does have beneficial effects of protecting you from sunlight. It will give you a lovely honey glow. So I have this sort of propolis glow, because if I use any creams on my skin, it will be a propolis cream. And also it helps regenerate collagen and elastin, which we really need in our skin. So with me, with my history of Ehlers-Danlos, collagen production is quite a struggle for my body. So propolis really is my medicine, my favorite medicine from the hive. So propolis is amazing stuff. And I actually have a podcast episode with James Fernley. So you can look back through all the episodes, find the one with him, and he is a global propolis expert. So definitely have a word with him, or have a listen to that episode, and he will cover any more details on propolis that you want to know. Then we have things that are perhaps a little bit more controversial, and things that I don't take out so often from a hive. So there's pollen. Now, a lot of people will take bee pollen and they will sprinkle it on their cereals, or they'll have it freeze dried in the hive, in their fridge. Now, pollen is really good for us. It's a really good product for human, and I've seen many articles where people have said that it's the only complete food that can sustain humans. I've also heard that honey is as well, but I think with the propolis, because it has fats in which honey doesn't have, then that makes it a bit more beneficial. And the pollen is where bees collect it from flowers and plants, but as they collect it, they're taking enzymes from their tongues, which come from their stomach, and then they bind the pollen together and stuff it in their pollen sacs on their legs. And so it's this mixture of compacting the pollen, adding their own enzymes from their tongues, that just seems to make pollen that bees have harvested extra, extra special. So you'll get these balls of pollen that the bees bring back to the hive. And the way to harvest it is to put a screen on the front of your hive which narrows the entrance. And what happens is the bees crawl through the entrance and it scrapes the balls of pollen off their legs, and then it drops down into a tray. So then you collect the pollen every few hours, or at the end of the day. And then again, you must freeze pollen because it will go off, it will ferment quite quickly. Now, what has been noticed is that bees, noticing that beekeepers have put these screens on their hives, will actually start collecting smaller quantities of pollen to enable them to bring it into the hive. That's how important pollen is to the bees. They're thinking, how can we get around this person stealing our pollen? We don't want the whole lot to go, so let's just bring back smaller quantities. So what the bees do with pollen is they take it into the hive and they actually allow it to ferment. They compact it down in the cells and they let it ferment, and then it becomes bee bread. And that's what they feed the larvae. So pollen is the protein that bees feed each other. So it is very, very important. So by all means, if you're in an area where your bees can collect an abundance of pollen, and if you're collecting some of the trays of pollen, only do it for a few hours at a time, or when you know that there's good weather and that the bees are going to be able to replenish their pollen stocks. Otherwise, you're going to really affect the growth of that colony if you're taking away all the protein. So that's my tips for pollen. Now, there's two other ones, royal jelly and venom. Now, royal jelly, again, has a wonderful reputation for being this magical substance, this incredible medicine. You'll see it being used in skin products. You'll see it mixed in with yogurts and smoothies, all kinds of health products that will have royal jelly added. Now, royal jelly, before you start buying it and thinking how wonderful it is, just have a little bit of knowledge about where it comes from. So royal jelly is a special substance that worker bees produce from the hypopharyngeal glands of their heads, and they secrete it and they feed all bees in the hive in the first 3 days of their life. So from an egg as they develop, they're given royal jelly to feed from. Now, the queen bee is only fed royal jelly for the whole of her life. That is her food. And that's what helps the queen bee live a lot longer and to be fertile. So royal jelly definitely has some special products and special capabilities, but it is really for bees. So if you are going to take royal jelly, really be sure, first of all, where it comes from, because you want to be sure that it is actually royal jelly, because such small amounts are produced by any hive that you've really got to know that that is what you're buying, that it isn't a fake royal jelly. And then also, you want to know that it's sustainably produced. So you want to know that the bees are cared for and that they're still able to survive. The colonies are not wiped out by all this royal jelly harvesting. Now, when beekeepers are breeding queens, they will also produce quite a lot of royal jelly because the bees are producing a whole load of queens in a frame. So instead of just having one new queen per hive, they're actually producing tens or hundreds of queens. And so then you'll have this sort of factory, a royal jelly and a queen factory. So quite often people that produce royal jelly also are rearing queen bees. So that's something to look out for if you're going to a supplier. And then the final product is venom. Now you might think, how on earth can venom be medicine? But it is. And I've also interviewed Dr. Stefan Stangu on this podcast, where he talks about venom and products from the hive and apitherapy. So bee stings were originally used by the Chinese before needles in acupuncture, because they were aware of the power of the venom and how it would stimulate the immune system to heal. Now, they would also put these stings along the meridians that they later would put needles on, because if you stimulated during your immune system along an energy pathway, it would really have an extra special impact. So venom has been known to be beneficial for a long time, but there are also people who have quite a severe reaction to venom. So you do really need to be careful whether you're being stung by a bee or whether you are taking apitherapy. Now, even the NHS will offer apitherapy. They will offer bee sting therapy, normally to beekeepers who've become allergic to bee stings. And they will then be offered in a syringe tiny amounts of bee venom to build up their resistance again. Now, what's really interesting is that to become allergic to bee stings, it can be a beekeeper who has had hundreds and hundreds of stings over many, many years, and then suddenly they'll have one sting too many and the body will overreact. It could also be someone who's never been stung by a bee before, and they just get that one sting and the body overreacts. It just doesn't know how to cope with having venom in the system. And so you do need to be very, very mindful. And if you're going to have bee sting therapy, you really need to go to a clinical practitioner, so somebody who is thoroughly trained in apitherapy and understands all the consequences and the possible occurrences that can happen from having bee sting therapy. Now, a little guideline that I find quite helpful is that apparently if you have an average of 4 stings a year, you're less likely to become allergic. So I like to think, okay, 4 stings a year is not too many. It's very beneficial for my health. And it means that I'm keeping my hand in with the bees and I'm less likely to have a big allergic reaction to bee stings. So if you are a beekeeper, just be mindful that just having a couple of stings is fine. But if you're going to repeatedly get 10, 20, 30 stings and you end up with numerous stings each year, then you are putting yourself at risk, because the body just can only take so much. So that gives you a good idea, a good basic background on all the different products from the hive. So if you're a beekeeper and you're thinking of ways of monetizing or getting a bit of a return on your investment, or if you're somebody that is interested in medicine from the hive, these little things will really help you. And when you do go to a practitioner, or when you do start looking things up, you've got a little bit of knowledge that can go a long way to help you make an informed decision. So I hope this has helped. Do share, do comment, do send a review. That would be so nice, just to put a little review. If you listen to this podcast, whichever platform you listen to, then just leave us a review, because that really helps for more people to find it. So thank you very much for listening. Bye.
You have to become yourself.
Join us next time on Creating a Buzz About Health podcast with Paula Carnell. Buzz you later.